What is the neurobiology of trust, and how can we tell whether or not we're actually trusting ourselves or when we're deluding ourselves? How do we navigate self-trust?
So the neurobiology of trust and kind of the paradox that we live in as human beings is that we're wired for survival and we're wired for protection. We're wired to be kind of competitive and like be the strongest and get the biggest piece of meat to bring home to feed ourselves and our families. So there's that aspect of us being wired that way, but we're also mammals. And so we're also wired in a way that we co-regulate, meaning that we need another being to show us the way. And that can feel like it's conflicting, right? Because it's like we need this other person to help us. Think about a small child. They wipe out, they fall down, and what's the first thing they do? They look to that adult caregiver to know how they should be responding. Like, do I cry because that hurt, or do I feel badly because I didn't do it right? So we're looking to that person, and we still do that as adults. Like, we co-regulate. We're in a room with people, and we will be feeling all of it and learning how to relate and how to know where we end and where they begin. So there's the trust in others, right? That comes from those early relationships. And then that's what teaches us how to trust ourselves. And so if we don't trust another person because they weren't reliable, or they were inconsistent, like maybe they were super loving and kind sometimes, and then they were unavailable or neglectful or abusive at another time. And so if you study attachment styles, which I have done, and there's lots out there in the world about that, we start to understand ourselves a little bit more based on how we were nurtured and how we were cared for. And if we also had a caregiver that didn't trust themselves, then we're not going to have a model for what does self-trust look like? What does self-confidence look like? What does self-reliance look like? So we learn so much by whatever that primary caregiver was offering to us. Now, with that said, and this is what I did my graduate work on, there are many people who did not have someone, or their someone really failed them in big ways. And yet they still worked it out on their own. And so that's the beauty of resilience, is that it's built in, it's hardwired. There's something called innate health. It's the part of us that wants to get back to equilibrium and balance and homeostasis. And it's the part of us that can pull ourselves up when we've been knocked down. And it's naturally occurring, but we also can cultivate that. We also can grow that and build that. So self-trust begins with knowing that you can listen to yourself and that there's information that's being signaled from your body to your brain and back down again. There's information that your brain is taking in from the world around you. That's called interoception and exteroception. And all of that is helping us make sense out of who we are and how we fit into the world. And all these different brilliant networks of the brain have lots of jobs, and they're all working concurrently. And sometimes some of them are switched on, and while others are quiet, there can be dysregulation at any level. And then there's always this self-righting capacity for everybody. So even somebody with, severe and chronic mental illness, there's still something inside of them that's trying to right itself, something that's trying to get back to a place of balance. And that's really what I try to appeal to in every single person that walks through my door here at my clinic, or who I get an opportunity to work with, even in the community, is that self-belief and that understanding that everyone's like a cork in water, that no matter how much is, pushing it down and pushing it under, as soon as that stuff is let go of, that cork is going to come back up and be buoyant.
We can often have different voices in our head who are talking to us. How do we know which to actually listen to?
That's the magic question, right? You don't really. I remember asking this question of my mentor probably 30 years ago and just saying, how do I know what to trust? And how do I know if this feeling is something I can count on? And the answer I remember hearing was that you just practice and then you test the waters. And so it's sort of the child who's learning how to walk, like they don't know how to do it, but they put one foot in front of the other and then they see if that gets them where they want to go. And so building self-trust and learning how to listen. And so for so many of us, the louder voice is the voice of the intellect and the ego and the learning and not the voice of wisdom or divinity. And we will feel like we're in that, but somebody else told me to do this, or somebody else thinks I should do this, or I think somebody thinks I should do this, instead of what do I think? What do I believe? What do I feel is right for me? And I have to take pause all the time and ask myself that, because as a empathic person, you get used to making sure everybody else is happy around you, because then you'll feel good. If everybody else feels good, then you'll feel good too. And you have to get to a place where you're like, sorry, they're not doing so well, but I can still feel good in spite of this person that I love and care for really suffering and struggling. I don't have to down-regulate and co-regulate in that regard, where I'm being pulled out of a regulated state to meet them. I can still hold my own grounding. And so how do you know if that voice that's coming through you is wisdom and your true voice? You don't. You just check it out. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, that feels right. You don't have to question it so much anymore, because you build this resonance where it's like, okay, now I know. You have momentum in that direction. But when you're first figuring it out, you're clumsy like a little kid. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall down. You're like, oops, that wasn't my truth. That was, I did that for someone else to make them happy. I worked with a shaman, and I worked with her for almost a decade weekly. And I remember her, she was a student of Don Miguel Ruiz's and a Toltec. And one of the things that she shared with me was some of the teaching that he had offered to her, which is, are you happy? And just constantly asking that question, are you happy? Are you happy? And making decisions that support that for yourself. I remember for 6 months asking that question constantly. I remembered snowshoeing up Mount Hood with my brother in the freezing cold, and I'm sweating because I was really not in good shape to be snowshoeing. And I remember going, are you happy, honey? And I'm like, hell no, this sucks. I want to be at home in front of the fireplace. But I had to just figure out, like, who am I? What do I want? What makes my heart sing? And can I still go for that, even if it's going to make somebody else unhappy? And I think ultimately that's where my partner of 22 years and I came to a point where we were both like, you know what? We both want something a little bit different that doesn't make the other person happy. And it's okay. How can we still honor and still continue to be great friends and fantastic parents? Still, we talk on the phone for probably over an hour every single week just about life, and we're still really great friends, and I feel very lucky. But trusting enough to know that you don't have to be pleasing other people all the time, that there's going to be times where you're making a choice for yourself because it's the right thing for you, and it might make somebody else unhappy. And I'm always considerate of the choices that I make. At least I try to be always considerate of how my choices are going to impact another person, or impact the environment, or impact my pets, or, whatever. I'm very conscientious about the choices I make, and are they supporting longevity for myself, my loved ones, my community, my family, the world, Mother Earth. I want to be making decisions that support vitality and are life-giving instead of life-taking.